Hello and welcome everyone to the May 16th regular legislative committee meeting of the town of Vegreville. To get us started, I'll be looking for a motion for the adoption of the agenda. Councillor Bullock makes the motion. Is there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next up, adoption of our minutes of our last regular ledge meeting. Councillor Lemko makes the motion. Any errors or omissions within those minutes? Seeing nobody frantically waving, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, first up we have a delegation. Miss Lisa DeGarga.
Yep, that's right.
Actions for Healthy Communities.
Yes, that's me. I'll see if we have the presentation on screens. A lot of places to look for people in this council chamber. Yes. Microphone is now on. Is that working for everybody?
Correct.
Perfect. Excellent. So I guess I'm going to look this direction so I can look at all of you in the face and look at the presentation. So first of all, I want to thank you so much for offering me the chance to come and introduce myself and my organization to you today. My name is Lisa DeGarra, and I have the pleasure of working as the manager of small centers for Action for Healthy Communities. I'll be talking a little bit about what my organization is and what we do, the role that I have as the manager of small centers, and the expansion that we have funded and proposed for the community of Vegreville, along with a number of other communities in the region, which will be effective on Canada Day. So we want to give you a bit of context about the work that we do and how we hope to be a support to the town of Vegreville and to the surrounding communities beginning in July and then hopefully for many years to come. So next slide, please. So who are we? Action for Healthy Communities is a settlement organization. We are funded by the Government of Canada to provide support to immigrants and refugees to Canada. It's an interesting kind of setup because the Government of Canada provides the funding for our operations, but we are an independent organization, so we're able to set the kind of programming that we want. We're able to provide the kind of supports that make sense for the communities that we serve. Very often in the settlement sector, we use the word newcomers, but as far as our organization is concerned, it doesn't really matter how new to Canada you happen to be. It doesn't matter if you got here 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, 2 years ago, 20 years ago. If you still require the services of a settlement organization, whether that's with language or understanding the education system, access to healthcare, social services, and so on, we want to be able to support people to have the best and most successful integration into Canadian life and to thrive in the communities that they choose to live in. All of our services are 100% free and funded. Originally, we were actually supposed to be coming into Vegreville on April the 1st, but we had some interesting issues with when the federal budget was released, and it was a whole drama. So the good news is from July 1st, we are fully funded to operate in this community, and all of the services that I'll discuss here are completely free to the communities that we serve, to the families that we serve. Because we get our funding through the federal allocation, through our contribution agreement, there's no cost associated with anything. It's all federally funded, but then community-driven so that the services are for the people who need them in those communities. My big focus is immigrant children in K-12 schools. That's my team's focus through a program we have called Settlement Workers in Schools. I've actually already had the pleasure of working a little bit with St. Mary's School here in Vegreville just because we've had some referrals. I can talk a little bit about that, but realistically we serve children in schools along with children who are younger than school age, working adults. There aren't a huge number of immigrant seniors, but we're also able to support immigrant seniors if they're in need of our services. So that's kind of the scale of what we provide. Next slide, please. So I wanted to provide this graph because I think this begins to speak to what I suspect is already being very well understood here in this community. Statistics Canada has demonstrated that until recently, the time when Canada had the greatest proportion of immigrants was sort of turn of the 20th century, the settlement of the prairies in particular. When we have Laurier's Last Best West and the settlement of the prairies and huge proportions of what we would now consider the historic Ukrainian arrivals to Canada, between 20 and 23% of everyone in Canada was an immigrant. After World War II, the baby boom and all those sorts of things, there was a very significant drop in the proportion of Canada which was immigrants, and that remained fairly flat until about the end of the 1990s. Into the 2010s, we've seen a really big shift in demographic trends in this country. The reality is Canada, like many other countries, is an aging one. And it's increasingly recognized immigration is an economic policy with a human heart. And so there is a need to have more and more workers that are coming into Canada who are of working age, who are raising their families here in Canada. So depending on how the next handful of years go, we'll either be sitting at a spot where about 29% of everyone in Canada is an immigrant or about 34%. So realistically, 3 in 10 to 1 in 3 people in this country will be an immigrant in about the next 15 years. Another data point, which I think bears mentioning, is that at the moment, about 30% of all children under the age of 15 are immigrants or have an immigrant as a parent. I'm lucky, I have one Canadian parent and one immigrant parent, so I get to get a sense of both worlds a little bit. My father speaks English as a first language, but he's still confused by everything that happens in this country, so very helpful perspective. The other detail that we'll mention is that in about the next 10 years, we estimate that 50%, half of all the children under the age of 15 in Canada will be immigrants. That's or children of immigrants. And that's a really important statistic to recall because a lot of the services and the supports we have designed for children, whether that's K-12 schools or even something as simple as a hockey program or a soccer program, we have to make sure that those are designed with this new audience in mind, with this new cohort in mind who may have slightly different needs. I had the opportunity to present about youth sports at a conference in Edmonton, and I mentioned exactly that figure, and I said, you know, this is not a frill, this is not kind of a nice to have, something to show what a good-hearted person you are. These are your customers. This is the essential cohort and group of people who will continue to ensure that your community thrives. And you could see that they were like, oh, we thought we were just gonna have to put up like a Filipino flag and call it a day. So it's a really important thing to note that this is a huge, huge demographic shift. Now, I don't have it on the slide because actually the information just came out this morning. My organization, Action, is part of a larger cohort of organizations called the Alberta Association of Immigrant Serving Agencies, ASA. Councillor Lemko attends quite a few of our meetings. ASA is an umbrella organization that represents all of the immigrant serving agencies in Alberta. And recently, they've been doing data about where Ukrainians have landed in the province with this new wave of Ukrainian arrivals. As you might expect, Calgary, Edmonton, Red Deer have the biggest proportion, they're larger centers. But among the smaller communities in Alberta, it goes Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, Vegreville. Vegreville is noted in the top 10 arrival sites by proportion and by number for Ukrainians into this province, which is kind of a remarkable thing considering Vegreville is a relatively smaller community. Now we know that Vegreville is a very strong historic site of the Ukrainian diaspora. Everybody loves to drive by the Pysanka on the side of the highway. It's iconic, it's essential. But it's really interesting to note that Vegreville has already been able to be such an integral part of that integration despite not having access to formal settlement services. So we noted that. That was something that we pushed to the government of Canada and said, this is a community that's been working hard on settling Ukrainians. Let's make sure that we have additional financial and human resources so that this can continue to be successful. So that's basically why I'm here now. Next slide, please. So what do we do? What is settlement? Realistically, I say, you know, if we've got immigrants who have problems, send them our way and we'll see what we can do for them. But there's a couple of things that we do specifically. Probably one of the biggest ones is language support, especially in K-12 schools. So you can imagine if you are 14 years old, you've just come from Ukraine, you're enrolled in grade 9, you don't speak a lick of English, your parents don't speak a lick of English, and you're sort of handed a timetable and off you go, let's see if we can sort you out in your grade 9 classes. Now, most youth, they're very engaged, they're very resilient, but it can be difficult to understand a lot of the nuances that we have in the Canadian education system here. What is 10-2 versus 10-1? What do you mean science 24? I thought I was in grade 11. You know, all these kinds of questions that will strike students. So some of what we do is language support. On my small team, we speak 8 languages. In our larger organization, we have access to people speaking more than 30 languages. So we do have a lot of first language speakers who've come from throughout the world who bring those experiences with them and can kind of triage between our Canadian culture and the cultures that people have brought with them. We do a tremendous amount of school support. As I mentioned, we've already done some work with St. Mary's School. We had a couple of students, one who wanted to know how she could convert her Ukrainian credits into Canadian ones so she could attend university. We're working on that. We have a couple of students who were struggling to find enough time to attend school because they were working so much, trying to send money back home, all sorts of different challenges. But that school support is really integral to the mission and to what we do. Our Settlement Workers in Schools program is currently offered in 7 school divisions throughout Alberta, both public and Catholic. And again, we're hoping to expand into Elk Island public schools officially. We've already been in Elk Island Catholic schools in a couple of communities for quite some time. We do a lot of capacity building. That can be for adults, for children, basically ensuring that when people arrive in Canada, whether they've been uprooted by war and crisis or just the sort of the general sense of displacement of intentionally emigrating to a new country, that people have the resources that they need, that they have the supports they need, that they understand how things work. If you are showing up to work every day and your employer isn't paying you, who do you call? What do you do? Or if you're showing up every day, your employer isn't paying you, you confront your employer and he says, I'm going to call immigration on you. What do you do then? I wish I could say I wasn't an expert in those situations, but we get about one of those a week. We do all these kinds of issues of supporting people in getting access to what they need in Canada. A big focus right now has been the exchange of driver's licenses. If you've got your Ukrainian driver's license, now, thankfully, you can swap it in for an Alberta driver's license. But what if you had the old style Ukrainian license, which is like a long piece of paper instead of our plastic card? And how do we negotiate with the registries? And all those kinds of logistical things that can really throw you for a loop if you don't have a full understanding of how Canada works. Those are a lot of things we support with. We offer adult education classes. One of the challenges that many of our clients, especially from the Middle East, have had, in many predominantly Muslim countries, it's actually illegal to charge interest because of religious principles about usury and so on. And what that means is that if you come into Canada never having had to deal with credit, never having understood credit, it's very easy to fall victim to predatory loans. Car loans in particular are a huge issue that we have to deal with. So ensuring that people understand financial planning, that they have an understanding of, what is a public college or public university versus a predatory college that maybe doesn't even offer a credential, having an understanding of all those things. And unfortunately, given recent events in this province when it comes to wildfires, we're now preparing a series of classes about emergency preparedness. When you get one of those scary alerts on your phone, what does it mean? How do you know when you need to go? What do you need to bring with you? Where are you going to go if you evacuate? These are things that can be completely overwhelming if you are having limited language, especially if you don't have a private vehicle. And so we're making sure that that information is in the hands of newcomers so that if there's an emergency or if they have a challenge, they can feel empowered that they know what to do. Finally, one of the interesting challenges is making sure that people have access to the essential services they need, especially in crisis. Income support is, oh boy, you gotta wait on phone quite a long time. We have access to an agency line, so we're able to jump a lot of the telephone queues, which I'm very thankful for. We also help a lot of our clients, to be honest, with the food bank. When I first started doing this work, I had an engagement with a client who said, I live in a house that has running water and electricity. How could I ever be allowed to access something like a food bank? Because in their country, it was just not an expectation. It was never something that they were allowed to do. So making sure that people know where to turn to get help, knowing the doors to knock on, the trusted places, so that people can really become a member of the community and feel that they have access to everything that they need. Next slide, please. So this is a map of where we serve at the moment. Interestingly, we tend to serve based on school divisions rather than towns. Originally, the idea was that it was going to be just the towns themselves, but realistically, in rural communities, school divisions are large and distributed. We know that Elk Island Catholic Schools, for example, is here in Vegreville. It's also in Sherwood Park. It's also in Fort Saskatchewan and Camrose. And so we've tended to make our service model school division based rather than town based, with the intention of being able to capture other schools who maybe still have immigrant students but don't necessarily have quite as many resources. Tomorrow, I'm driving off to our office in Bonnyville and Cold Lake. We'll be doing some engagement with the Lakeland Catholic School Division and the Public School Division, Northern Lights in the region. But sometimes you have to stop in, Wasetna because there's one immigrant family who's in need of support. So in all the divisions that we serve, we want to make sure that we have all the resources available and that if anybody walks through the door speaking any language from any country in the world, they're able to get access to what they need. Next slide, please. Right. So just to give you a sense of the languages that we speak, because this is really where we have our heavy hitters. So my small centers team speaks English, French, Spanish, Tagalog, which is the main language of the Philippines, and Bisaya, which is a regional dialect of the Philippines, and Ukrainian and Russian. So we've got a pretty good core group, but for example, if you've got somebody who is from the Horn of Africa, East Africa, we've got staff who speak Tigrinya, who speak Amharic, who speak Oromo, Somali, everything. We've got some staff members who speak a lot of the regionalized languages of Afghanistan, so in the event that we have any Afghan refugees, I haven't seen any in our rural Alberta centers, but if they show up, we have people who speak both Dari and Pashto, the two major regional languages, and again, pretty much any other language you can imagine. Somebody shows up speaking a language, we can find somebody who speaks that language. So that's one of the things that we really want to be able to offer. These are also predominantly first language speakers, so it's not just that you learned from a book, it's that you understand the culture that comes with it, which obviously is really key, especially when people are brand new. Next slide, please. So to give you my final comments, and then I'll obviously have time for questions. Beginning on July the 1st, we have a full-time equivalent position, one full-time settlement worker who will be available to serve this region. Realistically, it's supposed to be for Mundare, Vegreville, Fort Saskatchewan. We're still looking for an office, so maybe we'll be in an FCSS. Often we have like a room in an FCSS or a similar setup. Sometimes we're associated with adult learning councils. Like we have to do a little bit of shopping around, essentially. But we will have a one full-time equivalent position that's available. Our funding is on a 5-year agreement. So at minimum, this position would be held for 18 months from July of 2023 until not the following March, but the March after that. Ideally longer, because we have been able to demonstrate proof of concept. So this is not something where the funding comes and it goes straight away. We're on 5-year cyclical funding agreements with the Government of Canada, so we can really establish services where and when they're needed. The big thing, we're going to be recruiting in community, so I may be bothering people in the know about where there's a possibility of recruiting, because we want to find people who already live in the community. It's much easier than having somebody come in, and it's more meaningful. People have a sense of what works here. Basically, they need to be fluently bilingual in a second language and have a car. Everything else we can teach. We'll also be expanding out to Parkland County, although that's a bit more tenuous with the emergency situation being what it is there. And with that, I believe that concludes my presentation. Yes, it does. Fantastic. So thank you very much for having me again. I really appreciate the chance to talk. And if you have any questions, I'm delighted to answer them.
Well, first of all, Lisa, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
You sure stuck a lot in there.
I talk very, very quickly because I got a lot to say.
You must think
Thank you.
faster than you talk.
Well, sometimes.
Yeah, so I do have a couple of questions.
Yes.
The stat of right now that kids 15 and under, we're looking at 30% of children in this country are either immigrants or children of immigrant families. And in the next 10 years, we're looking at 50% on that. Well, that's something that we need to think about as we move forward here, because we're, in the business of recreation and parks and stuff. This is something that we need to address and need to know what their needs are going to be for that age group and past that. So hopefully your office will be able to assist us on that as we're making decisions.
Absolutely. It's always our pleasure to do so. We work with the Departments of Recreation in a number of different communities that we serve. We've got some fun things planned with the city of Camrose coming up in the near future. So absolutely, like, recreation is one of the really critical ones. We know, here's an example that we have from Camrose. One of the most common types of recreation that families engage in is getting kids signed up for swimming lessons. It's a common thing. It's an ordinary thing. In some of the towns that we serve, the demand is so high that it's like, you have to know that it's going to be 6 weeks in advance. You have to have an account already set up. You have to have the swimming lessons in your shopping cart, because when they drop at 10 a.m., they're gone. But if we've got our immigrant parents who are like, hey, yeah, I think I kind of might like to do some swimming lessons, is that something that they're able to have understood long enough in advance they can participate? Those kinds of things, like sign-ups, or maybe in sports and recreation, are there possibilities to learn to play hockey or do curling if you're 11 and you've never done it before? Maybe you've come from a warm climate where these were not part of the culture in which you lived. We've had the chance to do some trying out sports days. Curling in particular has been a real hit across all different communities, because it's hard to be good at, but it's not hard to try. So that's definitely one that we would love to engage on more, for sure.
Excellent. And one other question I have. So when people immigrate here, or even displaced Ukrainians, or whatever their situation, how they get to this country, can your organization help professionals have their credentials recognized in this country? Do you guys dig into that at all? Or?
So it's an interesting question. Here in Canada, we have a service that's called IQAS, International Qualifications Assessment Service. While we are not providers of the service, we can get people set up with the means of getting their credentials assessed. It's a really important challenge, because we know, especially with the displaced Ukrainians as an example, there are many people who are very qualified internationally, but they don't necessarily have the language level to participate in their field, so they can have their credentials recognized, but then are we able to support them in language learning so they can actually participate in that work? We have quite a lot of internationally trained physicians, as an example, who'd love to be practicing medicine in this country. That's a multi-year process of getting that recertification done, but we can certainly point them in the right direction and make sure they have all the information they need for that credential recognition and being able to support them thereafter.
Excellent. Any questions?
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Warba.
Well, first off, it's wonderful to see this. I think it's very, very needed. I, in my day job, work for a member of parliament, and I can tell you one of the biggest struggles that we have is people come to us who are not trained as experts in that, because we're dealing with a whole bunch of items, but what it seems to be is that all of the branches will bring people here, but they don't do anything to support the information and the applications that they need to take it. Even Service Canada, we have told somebody that something needs to be intaked at Service Canada, but there isn't anyone who can actually help them with that form. They'll physically take it in, but there isn't that issue. So our office being located in Two Hills, but the federal area for here would take up almost everywhere that you mentioned, we see this a lot. There is a high Mennonite population as well, so Low German is quite often, and I know a challenge in our office has literally been trying to speak with a family, that trying to explain to them, but they've brought their child who might only be 7 or 8 years old, and that's who we're speaking English through to then translate, but the concepts we're trying to give them even in English would be too high. So I think this is really wonderful to see, and I'm hoping that we see less people slip through the cracks. There's many people that have lived in a totally different lifestyle, and then all of a sudden they need to access some services, and we find out they've never been registered for even something as simple as healthcare, even though they may have lived in Alberta for a lot of years. So I think this is great, and hopefully it'll just help build a lot of healthy communities, so I think we'll be chatting a lot.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Looking forward to it.
Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I really appreciate the presentation, and I'm certain that your organization will be very, very well accepted in the community. I certainly, on the recreational side of things, have had personal experience because my wife is a registrar for soccer. And it's amazing how the lag time in the new Ukrainian immigrants when they arrived here, because she's still registering or helping register some of the kids, because through school or other things they found out soccer exists here, but they don't know how to get registered. And then from the flip side of it, it's all online registration, and there's another barrier to them to try and get that application filled out online and put it through. So I think they really do need assistance. And I think that with your organization being here, it might be another avenue for them to be able to transition more smoothly.
Excellent. I'm really glad to hear that. And I'm glad you mentioned the internet registration. One of the things that we have done historically and that we continue to do, we get a little bit of a capital budget every year for loaner laptops. And they're, technically speaking, we're supposed to loan them out and then like have, oh, we definitely need it back in 60 days. Sometimes families just end up with a laptop. What's the issue? The federal government's not going to go bankrupt over a couple laptops. But one of the big things that we notice is exactly that here in Canada, there's often an expectation that like everything can be done online. Everybody has the capacity to do everything online, and we know this is a challenge for many different demographic cohorts in the country. I had a really interesting experience recently with a young man of 15 in Tofield who had just emigrated a handful of months before. We gave him a loaner computer because he wasn't able to do homework, and we presented him with the computer, and he said, no, I don't want it. And I asked him, have you ever used a computer before? And he said no. So we sat with him for about 15 minutes. Here's how you double click, and this is what a mouse does, and it's just like using your phone. He took it away, and then we were getting messages all weekend saying, I didn't know you could watch YouTube on this. This is amazing. So it's really an opportunity to find where those gaps are, and they're a little different for each person and for each family, and bridging those gaps so that people can participate in great programs like recreational soccer that already exist. We know that in most communities there are wonderful programs that exist, and our newcomers just don't even know where to look. So we want to make sure that they're aware of those so that they can tap in and enjoy the resources that already exist.
Well, one of the other problems you have here is that when the registrar can only speak English and they're struggling with English, it's a real barrier, let alone being online.
Go ahead, Councillor Lemko.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, thank you for your presentation, Lisa. It's nice to see that what you talk about is what I've tried to tell these folks for a while there about ASA and the good work they do and the good work that you do. This sort of puts that in perspective of what we're trying to get at. You didn't mention in there about settlement services. Your office that will be located here is part of settlement services,
Yes.
right? Does this allow the access to the funding the government of Alberta recently announced for settlement services that the Ukrainian people or any others that are here had no access to because we weren't a settlement services agency, the Vegreville stands with Ukraine? Is there potential funding available?
That's a good question. I would have to have a look at what the provincial government has said. One of the interesting challenges that we've had is that some settlement agencies have their funding through both the provincial and federal governments. In our case, historically, we've only really had a federal agreement, although there's no reason that we couldn't have a provincial agreement. We just haven't pursued it. So it'll be worthwhile for us to examine that and see if there's benefits to us seeking a provincial settlement agreement as well. Anytime that there's funding available, we want to make sure we're accessing it. And the real benefit is we will support, whomever with whatever status. The federal government really only wants people to be supported that are permanent residents or Ukrainians coming through the QIT visa program. Realistically, in many of our offices, we have a ton of temporary foreign workers that are presenting any given day. And most of the time, those services are only provided by the province. We've just been providing them, saying like, paperwork is paperwork. But it will be important for us to pursue that provincial capacity, in part because it's additional funding. Maybe it could be an additional staff person. Like it's something that we'll certainly be exploring. But we're glad to hear that there is more funding that's coming available through the government of Alberta. The hope that the government of Alberta has is that more immigrants will choose to settle in smaller communities. At the moment, it's 71% of all the immigrants to Canada settle in either Greater Vancouver or Greater Toronto area. And then within Alberta, it's upwards of 85% of immigrants who settle in either Edmonton or Calgary. So we want to be able to spread the benefits of immigration including to smaller communities. And some of that means making sure that we have the right investments so that people can participate. So yeah, I might have to bother you about that at some point later, and then we'll see if we can find some more money.
Well, it is a bit of a sore spot here in our town because we do try to help with displaced Ukrainians as much as we can. And the provincial government comes here to make the announcements about this funding, but we don't qualify. They come here to announce the driver's license exchange program. They come here for all the announcements, but we don't qualify. We're not registered as a settlement area. And per capita, we probably take on more than anybody else in the country.
It's very, very high. It's certainly in the top 20. So we are aware of that, and part of the reason that we were able to secure this FTE and to secure this funding from our organization was making exactly those arguments to say, that, look at the volume of newcomers that Vegreville is bringing in relative to lots of other places. Look at this, look at that. And so that's part of the reason that we are able to launch this summer, is because of the excellent work that has already been ongoing here in the town of Vegreville, despite a lack of funding. And what we're really hoping is to just make these processes either smoother, to have fewer people doing work off the side of their desk that we know that they've been doing an excellent job doing, but just to have another specialist at the table that can hopefully support and just make it easier for everybody, basically.
So tell us, what can we do to help support your program and your...
Oh, that is an excellent question. Well, one of the things that I'll be doing sort of in the intervening couple of months is, we'll be looking for opportunities to rent spaces within the community, and it probably will be here in the town of Vegreville because geographically it makes the most sense. In most of the communities that we serve, we rent little adjacent offices, again, in adult learning, in FCSS offices, and so on. So we'll want to, have a little bit of a real estate assessment. I'm going to have to drive around and see what makes sense for us. But to be honest, one of the most effective things as a mayor and council that we would appreciate is being able to know who are the key players in this community, who are the people that we need to connect with. In some communities, a lot of work is done through the library. In some communities, a lot of work is done through the FCSS. Or in the smaller communities, many things are done through the schools or things like that. So to have a sense of who are the key players, maybe who are the key employers of Ukrainians. I understand there's been a couple of larger scale employers. Basically giving a sense of the community as you are experts, you're in the community all the time. And from there we can begin to build our strategy in a way that makes the most sense for Vegreville. We don't want to use a one size fits all. We want to make sure we have models that make sense for each community.
Okay, well, I know our FCSS department is very well knowledgeable of what everything is happening in this town. So hopefully that you go connect with them as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
Anything else that you may need, don't hesitate to reach out because we're looking forward. We already have the federal and provincial programs that are running here, and we're the hub for this area. And so we look forward to you helping these new people get settled in here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time to be able to speak with all of you. We're really looking forward to this expansion. I've been putting the Pysanka in like a million PowerPoints and saying, look at where we're going. So I really appreciate all of your attention and your time today. And I'm looking forward to be spending a whole lot more time here. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you. Okay. We'll be moving on. Next up is Director Saskew.
Hello, I am just going to get into this. So this is the topic of approval of unbudgeted expenditures policy. The attached approval of unbudgeted expenditures policy is scheduled for review, and there have been minor changes to the policy updating the definition of town manager to CAO to be consistent with the terminology used by the current town administration. So otherwise, this policy is completely unchanged. So we've left it as is, and it's brought to council for review right now.
Okay. So that was the only change, was just
That was the only
town
change.
manager to CAO.
Yes. So,
Okay.
if we go back into this policy and read through it, the most current, item that we brought forward to council would be the fireworks. What we could have done is use this policy and brought a memo to one of our council meetings stating that this amount was over budget. It was approved by the CAO because it was within his limits. We had that lovely sponsorship from the auto, dealers, and we overall would keep the function within budget. So we would just pull the net $2,000 from some other part of that budget to keep the overall budget on par, and we could have negated having to bring it forward to council because we weren't asking for additional funds in the end.
Okay. So we'll see this at the next council meeting?
Yes, it'd be an RCD, I believe.
Excellent. Any questions for Director Saskew? Okay, let's move on to the signing authority.
Okay, thank you, Worship. So this is the topic, signing authority for Legislative Services Manager. The proposal is to authorize the signing authority for Sandra Ling, Legislative Services Manager. So the background on this is in June 2023, myself will be going on a leave for approximately 12 months. To ensure efficient operations, the town should have at least 3 administration signing authorities. The signing authority structure for the town, effective May 24th, 2023, if passed by council next week, would be elective officials of the mayor or deputy mayor, together with administration, which would be the CAO, the corporate services director, the IP&D director, and the legislative services manager. So communication strategy on this, the written notification with a copy of the approved council meeting minutes will be forwarded to applicable financial institutions and corporations as required. So the recommendation is that town council authorize Sandra Ling as signing authority for the town of Vegreville effective May 24th, 2023.
Okay, any questions? Everybody understands the interim corporate director won't have that authority to sign. Okay, we will see that on Mondays, not Mondays, Wednesdays, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. It's Wednesday, the 24th.
Okay. And keep going, Director.
I just have all sorts of ones. So this is the topic regarding credit card payments. So the proposal is to obtain direction as to the town's fee structure around credit card payments. So I did some research. The background is that credit card payments are currently accepted by the town of Vegreville for payment of property taxes, utilities, accounts receivable, and for all other related payments. The merchant fees we are seeing for large payments range from 2.5 up to 10%. As I had noted the last time, we had a $23,000 transaction that cost us $2,000 in merchant fees. Council has the ability to set parameters around the acceptance of credit card payments, and below are examples of municipalities in Alberta who have set precedent for credit card payments. So property taxes, the City of Edmonton and City of Calgary do not accept credit cards or credit card checks as a method of paying property taxes. Strathcona County, Town of Edson, Town of Hinton, and Town of Bonnyville do not allow credit card payment for taxes. However, they do allow for credit card payments with Option Pay on their website. So we currently do subscribe to Option Pay, and this program charges the user a fee that gets tacked onto their property tax amount. And then in the end, Option Pay takes that fee, keeps it for themselves. They get whatever profits or proceeds from that. And then the town just gets the net proceeds of what the property tax amount was for the payment. In regards to utilities and accounts receivable, the City of Edmonton uses EPCOR to facilitate their utility payments. EPCOR charges 1.75% to pay utility bills through the portal on their credit card. The City of Calgary uses NMAX to facilitate utility payments. Only through the NMAX portal is a credit card accepted as a form of payment, and I wasn't able to find out if there was a fee associated with that or not. Strathcona County, the Town of Edson, Town of Hinton, and Town of Bonnyville allow for credit card payments through Option Pay. They do not accept credit card payments at their front counter, so only debit, cash, or check. And then towns and cities with virtual town hall programs allow for credit card payments for both utilities and receivables with the applicable fees added. So the communication strategy would be senior management would be informed and council resolution would be shared with the public once it's determined. So I've left council with a few options here that we can discuss. One is to pass a resolution to no longer accept credit card payments for property taxes, with the exception of using option pay on the website. And further, that town council pass a resolution to accept credit card payments for utilities and accounts receivable with an applicable fee through the virtual town hall or through option pay only. The other one, option 2, would be a resolution to no longer accept credit card payments for property taxes with the exception of option pay on the website. And that council also passed a resolution to accept credit card payments for utilities and accounts receivable under $500 in person or online, and set up an applicable fee through virtual town hall for payments over $500 or through option pay only. So with this option, we're allowing payments under $500 to be processed at our front counter without any fees. And then there would be a fee set up on virtual town hall for payments over $500, and same thing with option pay. So if anything came to our front counter over $500 with a credit card, we would redirect them to virtual town hall, or another option would be that we could set up a fee where we'd have to manually calculate it and charge them the fee at the front counter, which is a little bit more tedious, but we can make it work. Option 3 is that town council pass a resolution to no longer accept credit card payments for property taxes, utilities, or accounts receivable, with the exception of using option pay on the website. So this would be us losing no merchant fees whatsoever to any credit card payment. With this option, virtual town hall would not be able to accept any form of payment, and it would be used to have a place to have information for citizens to have in one place. And then the fourth option is to leave current processes unchanged and increase the bank fee budget by a minimum of $25,000 to account for increased fees that the town is seeing due to the rise in costs of processing credit cards. So our bank fee budget is in excess of $40,000 currently. So if we leave things unchanged in the future budgets, we'll have to raise by at least $25,000 to accommodate the payment methods that we are accepting today.
Okay. Any questions? On option pay, are we losing any money?
Absolutely not. So option pay accepts all the risk. I believe they charge a fairly high fee. It might be 4%. I believe it's more of a scaled, so depending on if it's a $500 payment or a $10,000 payment, they choose what fee they charge. In the end, the town gets the net amount that we requested.
So the citizens were to pay by credit card through option pay. We don't know exactly what the fee is going to be. Let's say their taxes are $5,000. Option pay will get us the $5,000. And
yeah, we get the net 5,000, and then they keep whatever the fee is.
But we will not be able to tell the residents of town what the fee will be.
We can tell after the fact. So we do get a summary that says this is the amount that they charged, this was the fee that option pay took, and that was the net amount charged to their card. But we only get what we asked for. So if it was $1,000 payment, the town in our bank account, we get $1,000. Option pay keeps the fee that they charge the client.
Go ahead, CAO Leg.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. And with that option pay service, the client's always advised prior to completing the transaction too, so they go in and, this is how much you want to pay, and then the fee gets displayed to them, and there's sort of a consent in there that, do you want to proceed with this payment? Go ahead. So they're not charged blindly per se. They get the option to decide whether or not they want to do it. So, yeah.
We'll start with Councillor Barry, then we'll move down.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. I have a follow-up on that. When they're notified of what their fee will be, and they decide to cancel out that, they can come in and pay by check and
Correct.
avoid the fee?
Councillor Bullock.
That took care of my question.
Okay.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. So I can appreciate that. And I know this is not for voting times or anything else. I still have the same concern on the number 2 and number 4 that, even with those options or having it where it's under an amount or over an amount, somehow, even though I understand we're talking different amounts, we're not then applying it fairly to everybody. I mean, in one way, we're still losing. So it is our requirement that everybody pay 100% of their cost. So I don't, even though we might be talking little amounts, it just seems unfair for me to say that we'd be in a situation where some people are asked to pay their full amount to us and some aren't. So I can appreciate some of these options, and thank you for all the work, Megan.
That is a good point. In small business, I mean, I was in small business for a long time, and we had the same policy. You know, anything over $500, there was a fee being charged. Anything under, but really, when it relates to collecting 100% of our taxes, and 100% of our receivables, and this is our goal. I mean, for 10 years, I've been paying everything my taxes, and I said every year, this is dumb. We are just losing money, and it doesn't make sense to me. So I would have to agree with Councilor Warwalla that I don't care if it's $18 or if it's $1,800, that everybody should pay 100% of what they're owing. And if they want to use a credit card for points or whatever, I mean, they'll make their own decisions. Anybody else have anything they want to say? Oh, go ahead, Councilor Berry.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I'll echo that to some extent. Certainly, when it comes to taxes, for sure, I think we have an onus to be collecting everything, not just a portion of the taxes. And I think that allowing the use of a credit card where we lose, in an instance that you said was $2,000, we just should not be giving away $2,000 of the tax money that we're collecting. And certainly when you go down to one of your last options that you're providing us, we're currently losing, and I say losing, $25,000 a year due to credit card fees, and that we would have to up it to $50,000 a year. That's getting to be a pretty good burden to the taxpayer, in my opinion. So I believe that if you want to use a credit card, you have to pay the fee.
Just so you know, Councilor Berry, the 25,000 they're talking about going up, I'm pretty sure that on taxes alone, my credit cards were over $70,000 a year in losses. So they just want to up what we're in bank fees from where we're at right now. So which do you think would be easier for the organization? Option 1 or 3?
Of course, I just put it in.
Oh, sorry, you want me to read it back to you?
Option. Oh, there it is. I have everything on one screen here, so it's a little bit difficult. So option 1 is to no longer accept, and then to have the virtual town hall, and that would be like we would set a fee for that, and then option 3 would probably be the easier, because then it's like we're not accepting credit card payments for anything, with the exception of using option pay or the website. With this option, we would just charge a fee. We'd have to determine what fee we would think is reasonable, 1.5, 2%, and then by only accepting it through the website and option pay, we are ensuring that we don't have any over-the-phone payments or any of those high-cost payments. I do foresee seeing some public that would be annoyed not being able to pay a credit card even with the fee at our front terminals, so that we could just charge the applicable fee. So that would be the option 1, where we would still accept credit card payments at our front counter, but then we'd have to add the fee on if they wanted to process with that. Because otherwise we'll have citizens coming in, wanting to pay their property taxes with their credit card, and they're like, well, no matter what, I want to pay it. I'm here right now, and us sending them away and saying, you have to go online and pay this.
Yeah, so option 1 still leaves the virtual town hall open, plus the
Yes.
optional pay or pay at the counter.
Yes. And that would mitigate issues that we'd have at the recreation center if people were putting deposits down for the social center or other facilities such as that. we could just have the fee set up for every spot at the town.
So, but different cards, different programs that people have in their cards have different fees. So how do we manage that? Like, how would we get through that? Let's say if you got an Air Miles card, you know, that they're gonna take from us being the vendor, let's say they take 4% or 3.5%, when a regular credit card with no gifts are involved or no points involved only use 1.3.
And that's where the problem comes. So we could take an average fee off of everybody and it would probably net to be reasonable. Or we could say absolutely no other credit card payments accepted other than on option pay. That's the only way to ensure that we get 100% of our fees. But then that causes issues with booking swimming lessons or other things that we have available, even at the visitor information where we are accepting bookings for the campground online or anything like that is, it could get difficult in theory.
See, this is where having a transaction under 500 and no fee charged to it works in most applications in small business. And then anything over, as in most, they already identify the card. Like, it didn't take me long to look at a credit card and know which one was a big points card. So, but we need to implement this as quickly as possible.
That is correct. As our tax notices went out last Thursday.
Does anybody else need any more information on this? No? So you guys are ready to go on Wednesday with the decision on this? Yes. Okay. Go ahead, CAO Leggett.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. To that end, are there any of the 4 options that you'd like us to not bring back for the other meeting? Do you want us to narrow it down here today?
Oh, I'd like you to take number 4 out.
Okay, so we'll bring back 1, 2, 3 and go from there. Okay.
Okay. You still got one more here, Director Saskew?
Okay, so there is a water meeting request on a letter from the customer here. Do we all have access to it, or do I need to read it out?
I think everybody has it.
Okay, so I actually have a timeline of events here where I can go through some of the details from our side of things. So they opened their account on May 1st of 2021. The water was on a new owner. So as it was already in the May bills, we're in May 1st, we were in the billing section for May. So the June bills come out on July 9th of 2021. Original meter was dead. Operators were able to change the meter on July 27th, 2021. So the work order was entered. The old meter was put into inactive. That was the meter that wasn't reading. And then the new meter was added to the account, but not switched to active status. So that's where our admin error occurred on the July 7th or July 27th, 2021, when the new meter was exchanged into the home, but it wasn't switched on the account. So the meter was reading, but it wasn't connected to the account. So the bills continue to generate with a base fee of $35.20 to $38.20 because this was over a couple of years. Our base fees changed marginally, and a water consumption of 0. So they received 0 reads for this entire time from July of 21 until the most current bill in 2023. Typically, our system would generate a system estimate in this case, but because it was a new account and the old meter was dead, it had no stored records to do the estimates on, and that is why she received a 0 read. The problem was discovered in May 2023 when we came across her account and noticed she wasn't getting any reads. So our utilities does do checks on our 0 reads from time to time. We have approximately 140 bills each month that read at 0 cubic meters. So obviously they take some time to go through. We have to investigate those one by one. So noticing that the meter was not set up correctly, the connection was made to the meter to the proper account. And then on the next USB import from our utilities, staff, that is where we got the consumption from July of 2021 until today. So the April bill was billed with 1 month of base fees and then the 225 cubic meters of water. The error was due to the meter not being set up, obviously, as I had stated, and it wouldn't have actually affected the actual read of our meter. It was just the ability of the meter to communicate with the account. So the 225 cubic meters averages to be about 11 cubic meters per month, which is realistic for a household. Operators read this meter this morning, and the read was 228.2 from the 225.3, which we billed last week. So the occupant used about 3 cubic meters in 1 week, and multiply that by 4 weeks, it's approximately 12 cubic meters per month. So the average that we have over the time period is consistent with what the use was in this last billing week. We do, as administration, we do expect customers to reach out to us if they feel like their bill is inaccurate. And overall, this is the series of events. So we did offer them no interest, I believe 8 months to pay with no interest, as it was an administrative error. And so that would be about $100 per month to pay the $800. And that's all I have right now. And the ask from them is that the meter is not reading correctly and that they would like another reading done on it.
Okay, so the average is 11 cubes a month is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay,
And
so,
we read her from last bill last week, so we read her meter again this week. It went from 223 or 221 to 225, so that was 3 cubic meters
a week.
that we've read in this last week. So multiply that by 4 weeks in a month, that's 12 cubic meters in a month. So based on the data logs, even just from the past week, it's the amounts that we've billed her are reasonable.
Okay, does the meter have the capability of having a history, like since the day is put in, how many cubes went through it?
And that's the problem, since it wasn't hooked up to appropriate account, we lose that history where we can pull those data logs.
Oh, so like
And our
there's no,
data logs are for, I think, only a month or two either way. So we pulled the data log for the last week because it was properly connected. But there was a communication problem. So the meter was there, it was reading, but it wasn't communicating with the account number
Yeah.
because it wasn't set up to.
I get that, Director Saskew, but because when we drove by, we were getting no reading. Because it wasn't told that this should be picking it up. But on the meter head itself, is there like a display, that says how many cubes have gone through it?
That would be a better question for Director Lefebvre. I cannot say for certain.
Because if the meter was changed but never hooked to the system, but does it keep track of all the cubes that go through it? I mean, because
does.
at the
So
top
I
of the
know it
meter
does.
head.
She's saying, yeah.
I know it does. I don't know that if it reads out digitally or like even with a little like.
Well, I'm sure that there's a dial on the top. So if we were to say that she's never been charged for any water since that new meter was put in, maybe we could just go take a look at the meter head and we could get exactly what she's owed.
Yeah, and our meter head is reading that amount that was read. So I'm actually getting updates here from.
Oh, no, sorry. I meant since July of 2021, is there a dial on the top that just keeps track since the day the meter was put in, how many cubes have gone through it?
And yes, I just got confirmation that there is. So there's the display screen with the read on the actual meter. So if the ratepayer went and looked at their meter right now, our last read just this morning was 228.2. So the read would be very close to 228.2. It might have gone up if they've used water this morning.
Okay, so, and we've offered terms on payment for what we caused by not having it being able to be read.
Yes, 8 months of interest free, which approximately $100 a month for the $800 bill.
Okay, so we've asked, the letter asked that the estimate amount be calculated is wrong. Could you please get a reading done? And we have done that. So there's not any ask here of to forgiveness or anything like that. It was just to have the meter read.
Yes.
Okay,
And then we did do a follow-up read this morning and confirmed that the water usage is reasonable based on the time between the last read and today's read was a week, and that was 3 cubes, which would average out to about 12 per month.
okay. Yeah, because I'm just under 11 a month at my place, so. Go ahead, Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Your Worship. So for my own clarity, when the new meter was put in, it would have read 0. But it
Yes.
wasn't communicating to the staff that drive by, picking up all of the signals. So the only,
It was.
sorry?
It was communicating to the drive-by, but because it wasn't set up in our system, the download, it just ended up being a 0 read because that meter wasn't set up like in the accounting side of the system. So there was no read for it, or there was no meter for it to pair to on our side of things when it does the read.
So that the only error was it wasn't communicating to get read correctly. There was no error in the amount of water that was actually being used. Because you can now
Correct.
look at it and see that it is using and recording a typical amount for that household.
Yeah, so the way that our reads work is that when it has a read to communicate somewhere, it keeps track of what the last read was. And so with this one, because it hadn't been read and communicated with our system for the year and a half, almost 2 years,
I guess what
when
I'm,
this one was set up correctly, it read the full amount of consumption for that entire time period.
I think that's the technical part of it. What I'm saying, in a sense, is if I looked at the meter every month, it would have read 11 more each month. The meter
Correct.
itself was registering the amount of water that was going through it and being used. It just wasn't getting calculated onto the bill.
Correct, yes.
It was actually getting read on the drive-by, which is the part that I didn't realize. What it was, there was no billing. When it got here to in-house, it wasn't being billed anything. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
That's
CA.
exactly right, Your Worship, and Councillor Barry. So the meter was functioning correctly by all estimations. When the staff was going by, the reads were pulling, but because that meter wasn't linked to that resident's account number on the billing system, when the download happened, that result just disappeared into cyberspace because the system didn't know to connect that meter to this account. So everything was correct without those two being linked, and then the resident, as a result, was being billed the minimums instead of the actual reads. So all of this process is doing is actually just getting that resident caught up between those bills that we did issue for those regular ones and what the actual consumption is that we now know because we've linked the two amounts together.
Go ahead.
And I can appreciate the frustration anytime somebody gets a bill that's larger like this. I mean, the only two parts of that I would say is I know they indicate living in a smaller house. Unfortunately, the size of the house doesn't actually change the usage. It's literally the number of people using the water. So unfortunately, a large house could also not use any more water typically. The only thing that I have in there is like, I'm just thinking of ways to be able to show, we can obviously explain the water meter reading, but is there any such thing as us being able to show a comparable house to her, saying, you know, for single resident, just to kind of show that that amount is the same? The only reason I'm wondering is I thought that was kind of close to what my water reading is, and there's more people in the house, so I'm just wondering about that.
We don't know how many people are in her house.
Yeah, she's saying alone, but.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. And to add to those comments, there's multiple other factors that, you know, play into that too, whether the toilets are low flow, toilets, low flow shower heads, dishwashers versus doing things in the sink, how many loads of laundry are done on a monthly basis, the occupation of the owner. I mean, if the owner's retired and not doing laundry on a regular, huge difference in water consumption. Blue collar employment versus, there's so many layers that come into that.
Well, and thank you. Then I guess we also have a responsibility to know in that length of time that we should have had water usage. I mean, unfortunately, that's something, I watch mine because I'm scared to death that we have a toilet leaking or something, right?
It was funny that the resident didn't report this to the town, that they weren't being billed for water for all that time.
And that's the interesting thing with these cases, Your Worship. We usually see the correspondence when the bill seems on the high side, but often when it's on the low side, there's very few folks that
I
come our
just
way
think,
and ask that
you go a
question.
couple years without using a drop of water or being billed for a drop of water, you'd think that would be a problem.
And to Director Saskew's point, we've got a number of them that are on the system at zero, but again, without knowing the exact personal situation and living situation in each of those households, we don't know whether that's accurate, errand, or perhaps the resident is just on vacation and turned the main off. We just don't know that. So the staff do their best to look at that and come up with, okay, maybe this one I need to flag and investigate, but it's impossible for us to know exactly what's going on in every household to be able to make that judgment call that, oh, yeah, this is wrong or this is right. So.
Okay, so there's no action item to this. There was a letter written and like Public Works has taken care of it. They've gone over, they've done the read, and you've hopefully negotiated a settlement deal with this resident. Okay. So we'll need to receive and file this at the next meeting though, correct? This letter? Okay. So it's just hit and miss when we do it? Just doesn't really matter. Yeah.
We'll send a letter, basically summarizing what was discussed today, even though it is available online. And that's the final follow-up, and that closes the loop.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Director Saskew. Okay, next up, CAO Leggett.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this one memo here from myself concerning the changes to the employee policy manual. So attached is the employee policy manual that has been updated to reflect the original wording of vacation accruals in section 4.17. So we've basically returned it to the 2018 language. Therefore, there have been no changes to the vacation accruals from the proposed last draft or the existing policy that is in place today. Clarification has also been added detailing that vacation carryover as of December 31st annually, with the maximum carryover days updated from the proposed 5 to 10 to be consistent with the days of vacation that is entitled now in employment standards. Additional information has been added noting that vacation can be taken in the first year of employment after successful completion of the probation period to the extent that the employee has accrued such vacation. Vacation accruals are calculated bi-weekly based on an employee start date and earned evenly throughout the calendar year. We've also added section 2.1, or that has been revised, to include a statement that the council authorizes the CAO to negotiate terms of employment upon hiring senior and/or specialized employees.
Okay, so those were what the clarifications that we're looking for this employee policy. So we'll see this on Wednesday with these new changes in there. Okay, good. Thank you very much. Next up, the mini golf.
I'll introduce this one as well, and then I'll turn it over to Manager of Community Engagement and Economic Development. So in front of you, today's a memo concerning the skateboard, the ramps and the skate park over at Pasanka Park. So in Budget 2023 deliberations, Council voted in favor of the creation of a non-permanent, meaning movable, greens to allow for winter storage mini golf course. This course would be placed on the concrete pad located in Pasanka Park, which at the time housed some skateboard infrastructure. Since the removal of the infrastructure during the week of May 8th, 2023, the town has heard from a few passionate residents opposed to the project. Given the emails received and other conversation in an open meeting regarding the proposed project is warranted, and council has been provided the attached project timelines and next steps for reference and consideration, and those are in the subsequent pages there. So.
Okay, so everybody has read the sequence of how this has gone through, and I would imagine everybody has received the same letters from a few residents in town. So is there any questions of council right now regarding this project? Okay, well, go ahead, Councillor Bullock.
Yeah, so I just want the public to know that this also was talked about, and it states it in here, the steps. And for those that probably haven't heard it or haven't read this yet, that through the committee, the stuff has been talked about before, and it was reviewed that it was underutilized, so, and the aging of the infrastructure, so that everyone can understand that it was looked at, and it's gone to committee, which it was brought back to us for that decision. So then there is public representation on those committees, so that everyone understands. It does go through a process before it actually comes here.
Well, I would thank those people that reached out and were disappointed with the decision that skate park will be removed in favor of a mini golf. But I just would like everybody to know that we don't make these decisions lightly. With the Rotary building this new great park, a real skate park, and the fact that we have an opportunity over at the Pysanka Park now to bring in a mini golf, which will be used by a greater percentage of our population. And again, it's putting a nice foot forward, a good foot forward to people that are stopping at the park. We have the opportunity to recapture some little bit of cost over the years there. We sure didn't really want to maintain 2 skate parks. I mean, we're trying to make changes in this community right now that we feel that are going to enhance the quality of life. It's no different than we're doing the new BMX park right now, the pump track over there, and we feel as council that trying to maintain that other skate park, really, as soon as the Rotary announced theirs, I know it's an inconvenience for some families, but the fact is that this opens up a lot more opportunity for a lot larger percentage of the population in our community. So this is what our decision was, and again, I knew not everybody was going to be happy with it, but that's the way things work. I mean, if you want change, if you're trying to create a different programs in town for youth, this is what we need to do. So go ahead, Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can see this from 2 sides. I have a daughter who likes to use that park. I have grandchildren who have used that park, but it's been very small. And the fact that the Rotary has stepped up and got the funding to actually put what I almost would call an international park, because they have them in a lot of other communities and they're well used. People actually even travel from one to the other, making this part of their trip and tour of going through these skate parks. I think that it's a real positive for the community. From the aspect of repurposing this one at the Pysanka Park, we don't take things lightly when we're going through budget. We look at it very carefully on absolutely every single item. And I'm very pleased this year when I got my tax notice that my taxes this year from last year went up 90 cents. So I think the only reason that it went up 90 cents is because the cost of policing through the RCMP in this town went up by 14%. So in all, this council managed to keep taxes low and actually lower. And I think that's an aspect of us taking a look at absolutely every item that is brought forward to us and deciding very carefully as to whether we're going to spend the money or not. I think that the aspect of the number of tourists that come through the town is underappreciated by most people. And I think that when we stop and realize the thousands of people that stop by there having them stay in town for a little bit longer is great. This town is being recognized, and it's being recognized as a good place to live and a good place to visit. So I think that I'll stand by the decision I made at budget time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lemko.
Thanks, Your Worship. And I'll echo the comments made by my colleagues here. I would take it back to the skateboard park, and I thank the people for putting that park together and the donations and all that. That was some 20-some years ago, and I understand that. I take my grandchildren to that park when they want to go and skateboard, or when they want to go in wintertime down the toboggan. So I drive them there, and they use the park. Now, this council didn't take this lightly. This has been on the go since 2021. The initiative to have tourism in the community, to bring more people to town, to utilize the facilities that we have, stay a little bit longer, spend some money at a restaurant, maybe buy some fuel, go get some groceries or whatever it is they're passing through. So the initiative of the council was to encourage more tourism, hence the corn maze, another example of bringing tourists to the town and in droves, hundreds of them. And so that was the initiative of council. Many of the sponsorship from many of the businesses in the community were to encourage tourism. So donations were made on their part for nothing in return other than maybe the opportunity to have money invested back from those tourists. I know it's tough at times to see something like that skateboard park for the children, but we've put walking trails in. We've expanded playgrounds. We're putting up a pump track in the Foxview area, and walking trails on the south side of town, walking trails in Man-Made Lake, and the outdoor arena. I remember back in the day when the outdoor arena was being proposed by the Kinsmen and Canettes, and the pushback we had from many residents. If we had to stay back and say, you know what, we can't move forward, there'd be no outdoor arena out there. The Vortex football field, and now with the Rotary and the skateboard park, and we have the comment about no parking. Well, we can park at the high school, and the children can use the skateboards on the walking trail that will take them to the skateboard park. I think there's many things in our community for families that are free, and you just need to go find them and utilize them. So the decision made to do this park, although it's difficult and tough, but we need to move forward, and that's what this council did, move forward.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Worba.
This is just a comment to something that Councillor Lemko mentioned. We were talking about there being a lot of items that are free, and I think there are, but there's also some value when putting in something new. I mean, we didn't take the decision lightly at all. We know that anything that's put in for recreation also requires ongoing maintenance. And in one way, we were trying to do the most diligent thing we could with tax dollars when we knew that another group was funding the similar type. Do you continue? Because there's always, we've spent a lot of dollars on ongoing maintenance or repair of sometimes vandalism and other things that can happen. So we had to weigh out a little bit of, do we continue to put those maintenance dollars into that, or another group is already funding it? Can we use those same dollars to something new? We were encouraged through a bunch of surveys we've done. I was on the original tourism board that encouraged us to think outside the box and not automatically just replace what we have, because it might not be what the new groups coming in are wanting. So this is another opportunity, but in reference to the part about what Councillor Lemko mentioned about, you know, there being a number of free items, there are some things that we do replace that might have a user fee, but that user fee is not because we're trying to make money off of it per se. They are so that those maintenances can be ongoing and not impact necessarily the taxpayers, especially when they are tourism items that get used from outside the community. But those little bit of fees that come with it help ensure that those items have some funding going back in there for maintenance in the future too. So I totally understand the frustration. Sometimes it's sad when the timelines don't match up. You know, we would love everything to finish ahead of time, but the reality is, in order to put in mini golf, we were going to have to remove something in that same summer timeline. We can't build it in the winter per se. So I definitely appreciate that people reached out and want to encourage them too, but I really hope that in the end they see this as an improvement, just as that outdoor rink. I mean, that thing gets used in summer and winter and all the time. And that is another example of a free site. We actually don't charge booking fees or anything for it, which some communities do. Some communities you actually have to book to use some of those locations. So again, appreciate it, but I think this will be a good project.
Okay. Councilor Curtis, yep.
I just appreciate the letters again, as well as the concern. And I just ask that, those that are concerned, get a hold of the agenda and the notes and really go through this timeline and see the thought process that was put into making this decision, because it's laid out very well here, and it might help you put your mind at ease on this a bit too. So.
Okay. Councilor Bullock, yep.
Just like to add that also that we do appreciate the public reaching out to us. Sometimes we just wish you would reach out to us before going to social media or avenues in that way. It's just be nice, because we are open to hearing ideas from different members of the public. Like, we like hearing ideas. Got a concern, writing us a letter is a fantastic thing to do. We are looking for passionate people to these committees also, and maybe one of them could be the right one.
Well, I just want to recognize, because I remember back in the day when there was this project was taken on, and the local skateboarders were going door to door and having fundraisers, and of course there was donations from businesses and stuff, and I know I helped down there. My son spent a lot of time at that wave park, and I mean, to the point where we needed to go find something bigger and better. And so the original group that put that together, it was a very worthwhile effort, and it lasted this long. But the fact is now that we're taking steps to make changes. With the new skate park coming in, we are going to now put something in that more of our residents can actually use. I know some of the comments were, "Are you just doing this for tourism?" Well, sure, it does have an aspect. I mean, when people come to visit the park, we'd like to be able to encourage them to do some other activities, hence the paddle boats, the rent-a-bike, and other things. But in no means are we, did we make this decision, on not recognizing the effort that was put in, but the ongoing cost of maintaining two, it really doesn't make any sense to us. So, and myself personally, if somebody's upset, if they want to go on social media, that's fine. I mean, we don't have the luxury of determining what's best for one or two individuals or 4 or 5 families that may be convenient for. When we make decisions that are based on the best for the whole community, not just if it's something close to your place. I mean, people on the south side have to travel over to the north side all the time to use the best parks that we have here. So, I mean, again, and like I said, if somebody is upset, I mean, they have every right to be upset. But like I said, the decisions we made are for a lot larger user group than what was using that facility. So that being said, hopefully we'll see I guess the electrical goes in first, and then we'll have it fenced. Meanwhile, we're going to be painting the cement pad, waiting for the equipment for the mini golf to get here. So stay tuned, folks. Thank you. I guess the rest is for me. Okay, so Vegreville District Chamber of Commerce General Meeting is on May the 18th, 6 p.m. at the Kinsman Golf Course. So I know Councilor Bullock, you're going. Is there anybody else attending?
If you do plan on attending, please let me know so I can register you, and then they know who to.
I will be attending. Okay, thank you. Next up, we have a letter from Lana from Vallet, fee waiver exemption. So I know for nonprofits in the past we've done this. They've had their, they've changed over their fluorescent lighting tubes, and they're looking, they had 70 to 80 tubes, and it's a $1 recycling fee at the ball beater over there. So they asked the mayor and council to approve their request to have said fees waived given their nonprofit status. So this will come at Wednesday's meeting, okay? And just so the user know that in the past, we don't really charge for nonprofits for that service, so. Okay. Next up is the Pride Week Planning Committee. Attention, Mayor and Council. This proposal comes from multiple organizations here in Vegreville, including the Vegreville and District Family and Community Support Services, VAG-L Drug, Mental Health Capacity Building, Vegreville United Church, Vegreville Composite A.L. Horton Schools, Vegreville Centennial Library, Alberta Health Services, and Vegreville Family Resource Network. We all believe that it is important for the town of Vegreville to recognize and stand for the acceptance of the LGBTQ2S plus community members in Vegreville. For the purposes of our letter, we will be referring to ourselves as Pride Week Planning Committee. Okay, so I'm not going to read this whole thing. This is basically the same request that we've seen last year. So the recommendation is we appreciate the town of Vegreville's support in celebrating Pride Week for our Vegreville residents. The committee will be funding the initiative and is requesting this becomes an annual event in the month of June, which would include raising a pride flag at the town entrance signs and painting and maintaining the Main Street intersection crosswalk at 50th Street and 49th Avenue between the town of Vegreville building and the CIBC to match the pride flag. So basically, we've never painted that crosswalk and maintained it ourselves. It was usually their committee that did that. Is that not correct? So.
Yeah, they're gonna.
Go ahead, Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Worship. It may be possible that the very first year of this, we may have painted it. But in the last few years, it's always been the Pride Committee that has paid for the supplies and did the actual painting themselves and maintained it.
Yeah, so again, I mean, they've given us the flags and we've flew the flag at each end of town at our signage, and I don't remember us ever painting the crosswalk or maintaining it, so we'll get some clarity on that if we could. I mean, if that's what they're requesting of us, go ahead.
I think it might just be the way it was worded. I think they're just asking, because they are saying the committee will be funding the initiative.
Yeah.
So I think maybe they just are asking for us to make it an annual repeat, because I thought we actually did that last year, that we said we were in support of allowing them to do the crosswalk and the flags. And I thought last year we talked about making it so that they wouldn't have to come back with the ask every year, but maybe there wasn't an opportunity to make that official. Does anyone have?
Not off the top of my head, I cannot remember. I'd have to go back into the minutes and see what was presented for last Pride Week.
Yeah, I recall some discussion on it too, or at least the discussion around the topic happened, but where exactly it landed, I'm not sure, but, yeah.
So, and we put this on our social media and stuff too. We were supporting this. Go ahead, James.
That's correct. So no different than in any of the proclamation requests that come forward. So for Economic Development Week last week, there has been a request to declare this week as Pride Week, whatever the week in question is, and we put that public notification out through our social media channels.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, George. I think I'll correct myself. I believe that I was confusing it with when we painted some crosswalks for Paint the Town Red 100 for the 150th anniversary. I believe they have always supplied the paint and done the painting themselves on this crosswalk out here for Pride Week.
It says the committee will be funding an initiative and is requesting, but then sort of it sort of looks like the ask is for us to paint and maintain. So we'll just clarify that, but, you know, I don't, I mean, do we have to pass this every year, the request, or?
That'll be up to council. I will review, I'll do an action item and review what was presented last year and the previous years and see where it left off and clarify with the committee and bring it to Wednesday's council meeting with recommendations. And if council is interested, we can possibly look at a recommendation of allowing it to
Yeah.
continue, like to roll over every year.
I just have a question.
Go ahead.
This probably isn't our issue because this would be more operational, but do you remember by chance, CEO Leggett, last year, there was a lot of problems with the paint. Do you remember, was it the paint or was it the weather? Because for some reason, I thought that I remembered that it came off really fast.
It did, thanks, Counselor. Part of the issue, if I recall those conversations, was that the crosswalk is that cobblestone type material and the paint doesn't adhere to it super well, but it just happens to be that particular spot, right, or the material, so, Dan might be able to comment better on that. Is there, to that end, is there a location that might be better, that would stick better? And I'm not 100% don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
The first year we did it, it rained on it right off the bat. Last year, really, there was some touch up to do because of some tire marks on it, but other than that, it wasn't that bad. So.
Cobblestone material is quite porous.
Yeah.
Sucks it in. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next up is roundtable, and we'll start with Councillor Rohrer.
Well, I think we kind of discussed my issues that I had contacted with. The only thing I'm just leave that back at is anytime somebody reaches out, very much to echo what Councillor Bullock said, I appreciate that. We want to hear from everybody, and but the issue I was reached out to was about the Pesica putt. So that's all I got.
Okay, Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, the only contacts I've had were on this same issue. But I just have to say that I think that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, the community was always much more involved in trying to see things accomplished than perchance even they are now. It's with a sad heart that I see so many groups struggling to get volunteers to come out. And when I do see a group express what they accomplished 20 years ago, I look at it and say, I wish that were still happening today. I'm speaking that because it seems that we can't get volunteers that would be prepared to take over the corn maze. And those that have been involved are burnt out. I have tried for 2 years to see if people would volunteer and get a historical society up like it used to be 150 years ago. And so far, 4 people have been interested. So I see our community right now being in silos, and they don't seem to really get out and volunteer the same. And I'll just speak on behalf of my wife's endeavors in soccer, where currently she's struggling to try and get everything going because she's doing the role of about 5 directors instead of 1. And I just wish the community would realize that in order for us to keep things going in this community, we have to get more people and younger people out and starting to volunteer. That's my rant. Thank you.
Well said. Councillor Lemke.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to just a little more on the skateboard park dismantling of that. I know it's tough, and I sympathize with the people who have who wrote letters and had a concern with that being torn down. And reading the comments and all those, I take all that personally. I don't know why, but it's just because I care so much about children and this community. And I know change is hard. It's really hard as we move forward, and it's even harder when you get to be my age to accept change as we move forward in a community. So bear with us. We're doing what we can for the community, for all the children in the community, and seniors and all the likes. So that's my comments on that. Other things in the community, the skateboard park that's coming up by the high school. It's exciting to see that. The pump track and some of the children that are already playing on it, and the screams and the yelling and it's just nice to hear in the neighborhood, children out playing and stuff. So the Blue Jays playing ball at the Ball Diamond, the beautiful facility we have there, and all the things that are happening in this town. It's exciting to be part of Vegreville right now.
Thank you very much. Councillor Curtis.
Yeah, similar for me. With the skate park thing, I don't have too much else to say. Beware of the smoke coming through town here soon, I think. If you have any kind of asthma or COPD, or depending on the winds, we're going to get a lot of smoke in here from the fires, so keep your family safe.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bullock.
Well, not much for me to comment on beside the skate park, and same thing, echo everyone's sentiment. I appreciate the volunteers and the businesses that worked on it that many years ago. I really do. And, we're just looking for the betterment of the community, and we're trying to make the best decisions that we can. And we're going to continue to do so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for what you do every day. A little update out at the old landfill coming into town, the 10 acres. I had lunch with Dr. Jan Solosky last week regarding the 10 acres, and they feel that they don't want to put hemp in there again. They would like to give it one more year, so they're going to seed it to barley, and they're willing to pay us $100 an acre to take off the crop. So we'll be getting $1,000 of rent out of that, and then next year, hopefully, that they'll be ready for to put in hemp there again, which would be good. PV Mart, the road, sort of made a commitment to the owner and developer. We did on council a couple of years ago that we were going to look at redoing that road, that service road in front of there. Since I've had many conversations with him since then, even at the grand opening, and our funding was cut in half, basically through MSI. And right now, with what's going on with our forced sewer main right now leaving town and the upgrades, we just don't have it in the budget. I know it's still in our 5-year plan, but I was wondering if we could have Public Works get back to council with a plan of what they can do to maybe fix in some of the potholes or something for now on that service road. We did make a commitment to those people when they went to spend a few $1 million there on that upgrade, and I would love to hold our end of the deal, but where we're at with some major infrastructure issues, we can't do it right now, but if we can do something just to keep it up a little bit for them, it'd be nice. Where are we at with our highway signage?
So, thanks, Your Worship. So that project, we received approval from the Ministry of Transportation for the locations. It did take some time to sort of, I'm going to say, massage those locations exactly where we wanted them. At the onset there, we had problems with the spacing between the lines, and then there also happened to be some underground infrastructure there that was an issue as well. So quite a bit of back and forth between the ministry and the contractor to get that spacing just right. We did get approval from the ministry, so that's good to go, and the signage contractor has started to build the signs. I spoke to them recently, and they assured me that will absolutely be done this year.
A month?
They're hoping for, by the end of July. So, yeah.
Okay. 5 years, that's it's crazy.
I
It is
inherited
crazy.
it last year.
I know. No, don't worry, you've only been here for a year and a half.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know some
I
of the
know, it's not
history,
all yours.
For sure. For sure. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's, yeah, I have every assurance that that will be this year, no fail.
Okay, can you give us an update on some of the municipal problems with complaints, especially the thread protector business that's over there? Because we've told those residents we were going to do something there.
Absolutely. So definitely, you know, sympathize with those residents that are seeing that, and we know it's a problem. The manager of protective services had been in communication with the business owner, had given them till April 30th to communicate a plan to us as to what they intended to do. We understand that that the lease in that property is coming up, and they're looking at moving to a new location. So found out last week there as well that that looks like it's happening, and they need to be out by June, which is the end of their lease. As a backstop, we've also contacted the property owner, which happens to be a large oil company, and spoke to somebody in the lands management kind of branch there, and they've said to keep them posted if something doesn't happen. But long story short, you know, we'll just have to ask those property owners to bear with us a little bit longer while we accommodate this business to move. They've given us every assurance they're willing to work with us and move to a more suitable location, that won't be a problem.
Okay, thank you. And one more item that I have is I spoke to Sandra this morning, and Sandra's in the emergency plan group or committee in our community. And I asked her to maybe look into some information of what we could offer as a community. We know there's a lot of people being evacuated all over the province and stuff right now. And I would like for us to be prepared if there's anything that we could offer. I mean, I know that a lot of evacuees are running from community to community trying to find a spot. But if there's something that we could offer and be assistance to any other, you know, anybody from Alberta that's been evacuated, that we have hotels, we have campsites, and, you know, we have facilities that we could help out. So did you find anything out today, Sandra?
One of the big things right now is the registration. All the emergency registration, like the evacuee reception centers and every place that they have to register, they're all coming from as close to the evacuation center and further out. So it kind of ends in Edmonton. And now that they are actually, like some of the communities, they're letting, for example, Drayton Valley, the evacuation order has been lifted, they're allowed to go back home. They are hoping to move more and more evacuees closer to home and back into their communities as quickly as they can. The Provincial Operations Center is inundated with communities that have reached out and saying, like, we have this available. They are very aware of what each community has for housing, of evacuees for hotels and campgrounds and stuff like that. So basically for us, it's just getting the word out locally that if you have family and friends that are being evacuated and they, like, if they happen to be able to get out with an RV, come in and talk to us. Basically, there is provincial money if you've been evacuated. There are rules around how they apply for this and how they get reimbursed for this and stuff like that. So it may not be, please come camp at our campground, it's going to be free for you type thing. It may be you may have to pay and submit your receipts and everything. We do have to follow the rules that the emergency reception center set out for the evacuees to claim, but they are aware that we're here, and their goal is to keep them as close to home as possible, if not at home, and hopefully we won't be needed at all because it won't move this far east.
Yeah, and the reason I brought this up, I know there's lots of people at the Expo Center in Edmonton laying on cots and stuff right now, and plus the fact, are we prepared if we were deemed that next community? Do we have a game plan how we would handle people coming in? And then I don't know who's in charge of that, but I mean,
If we get the call that we start taking in evacuees, our emergency social services, our ESS department is ready. We practice these things. We do our tabletop exercises, and the emergency management, both the Vegreville and the region, we're good to go. We're ready for this.
good. Being prepared is always good. And the reason I reached out, I just want, the province to know, like, no matter what, that we're willing and ready to do our part if there's something comes up, and, because it looks like a lot of the people that were being chased north are now have to be pushed south, and, so this is, and as long as we would be prepared to take on anybody else, so. Okay. Next up, director's highlights, and we're gonna start with Director Saskew. She's still online? Yeah.
Thank you, your worship. I just have a couple quick highlights today. So just an update, I finalized the land lease on our North Parkway drainage section. So this was the lease that Clara Narot had canceled in 2022. So that is good. We will have somebody seeding that property, and it won't be overrun with weeds that we will have to be responsible for. I also was working with the manager of Seed to update the town-owned land sales policy. So we met with our internal ECDEV committee to discuss the revised policy, and we are working with the realtors in upcoming weeks to discuss that policy going forward. I also met with Shrinatech for us to go through our IT priorities for 2023-2024 onwards. We discussed the replacement of hardware as needed for the town, as well as our server replacements. So I'm going to make sure that is finalized before I go on leave in June, so that we have our budget set in place for the next 2 years. Also had discussions with Rotary regarding the bike and skate park. As you know, as part of their funding agreement, the town had pledged a contribution of $40,000, which was in our 2023 budget. So we have put this payment in for processing, and that will be going to Rotary in the following week or two. And that's all I got.
Thank you very much. Okay, next up, CAO highlights.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just speaking to the action items list there, good level of completion over the last couple of weeks on several items. One to note the council had asked for specifically there was number 35, the response letter to the RCMP. So that did get sent. And other than that, yeah, everything's on track.
Any questions regarding the report?
I'll scratch the completed ones off there for the next version of it too.
Okay, well, we'll get you a bunch more to put on there then.
Scratch slow.
Okay, so everybody knows that the office is closed here on Monday? Yeah, that's the way we're gonna work, the way we're gonna roll. The chamber is running the political forum on May 23rd here at Social Center, correct? Yep. We have our council meeting on Wednesday, May the 24th. Ledge is on June the 6th. And then we'll have one council meeting in June on the 12th, correct? Only one in June?
No, in June, we still have the two. It's July and August. We will have
Okay.
one each.
Okay. Is there any other business of council? Then I will adjourn this meeting at 4:44.